Okay, I think we'll begin. People can join as I'm talking, but I'd just like to thank everyone for joining today and taking time out of your evening to be here. My name's Esther. I'm a third year student at Cardiff University, undergraduate student. I'm also one of the CSP Student Reference Group Wales officers. So I thought it'd be really nice to put together this webinar today just to kind of prepare people for starting their first job as a physiotherapist, their first Band 5 job. So I'd just like to introduce our speakers. We've got Chloe here, and we've also got Alex coming later on. Chloe is in her first year of work, so she's a new graduate and new Band 5 physio, so she's going to be speaking to us first. And then Alex that's going to be speaking later. She's a professional advisor for the CSP. And then we've also got Steph, who is the CSP student coordinator. I just have to apologise. Beth, who was one of our speakers, won't be able to make it today just because of an emergency. We will start with Chloe, and then we'll go into a little time of Q&A, and then we might just signpost you to a few resources that you can look at on the CSP website, and then Alex will speak, and then we might do another Q&A. And yeah, I'm just going to hand over to Chloe.
Thanks, Esther. So yeah, like I said, I'm a newly qualified physio. Been qualified nearly a year now, which is crazy. That's gone really fast. So I also studied at Cardiff University, and I'm now working in Cardiff as well. So I started in September and did sort of my first 7-8 months in community, and then I'm now sort of 2 months into my critical care and surgery rotation. So kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. I feel like it's given me sort of a nice introduction to the world of kind of working as a Band 5 physio. I haven't had a lot of time this week to prepare for this because, as you guys will find out when you qualify, it's quite a busy time because you've got your work to do, and then outside of that you're kind of I found that it's quite a lot of new stuff to take in when you're newly qualified. So yeah, my weeks are pretty busy at the moment, but yeah, I kind of, if you guys pop some questions in, it'd be helpful to know what you want to know, and then I can hopefully try and answer those. So yeah.
Would you like me to read them out for you, Chloe?
Yeah, would that be all right?
Yeah, of course.
I'm not doing it on my laptop, so.
Okay, so Rosie has asked, how long did it take you to get a job?
I think, to be fair, we're in a little bit of a different situation in Wales because we have like the NHS bursary still here. But for me, I applied for 4 different jobs before I got mine. So probably a couple of months, but it really can vary. I know people that have got their job the first time around, or people that have been interviewing for kind of months and months. And it's not really, I think it's such a, when you're applying for your job, it takes a bit of practice, I found, with how to write your application, how to answer the interview questions, and I think it's sort of just seeing it as, even if you get that rejection when you apply for a job, it's not like a failure. Just use it as, okay, I'm going to get some feedback from them, see what I could improve on for next time, and then take that with you into your next job application. And I think it's sort of being quite, like I would say, I was quite open with where I wanted to work, which probably made it a little bit easier. Whereas if you're quite set on, I want a specific location, you might have to wait a bit longer for them to advertise. But yeah, I think I just remember that you're going to be a physio, the rest of your life. So there's no kind of rush to get a job. Don't panic if you don't get the first one that you apply for. But yeah, I'd say just make sure you get feedback. Is probably my biggest kind of tip. And yeah, I'd probably, if you're interested in a job, get in contact before you apply, because it looks good to kind of get your name out there, show that you're interested. And then in terms of kind of interview prep, some things that I wish I'd known beforehand would be to have a kind of refresh of your MSK, your neuro, your respiratory knowledge, because generally the interviews are they'll be sort of half looking at those scenarios and your knowledge on how you'd manage different patients, and then half on kind of the values of the trust you're working for. So every trust will have slightly different values, so it's worth knowing those and perhaps having a couple of examples of different situations both within physio and kind of outside where you've demonstrated them. So hopefully that helps a little bit for that one.
Okay, so I don't know if you've already answered this one, but I guess you can maybe clarify a bit more on this. When did you start applying for your first job?
So I started applying in like the March, April last year. Obviously things were a little bit kind of different because of COVID. But yeah, most of the jobs started coming out about the March and April time to up to like June. And that was for sort of starting once you qualified in the summer. But again, I also know people that applied for jobs in the January before they were due to graduate in the summer. Obviously with the master's courses, they tend to graduate in December, so then they might apply for a January start. But again, some people you might want to have a little bit of a break. So I think there's always a steady stream of band 5 jobs being advertised, but I think the bulk of them tend to be sort of between like March and May time. So that's when I'd start thinking about if you're looking to start work kind of as soon as you've graduated. But
thank you. The next one is, what are the durations of each rotation?
Again, I think that's one that's going to vary depending on what health board you're in. So in Cardiff, where I am, they're 6-month rotations, although because of COVID, like our last one ended up extended. Generally, they tend to either be 4 months or 6 months, tends to be what they are. Some trusts will do sort of for your things like your MSK and your respiratory, they might do like a double rotation so you can really get your head around it. But I like it because it gives you're getting to do a little bit of everything, but it is sometimes a challenge when you just get comfortable in the team, you just get into a routine and then you have to move to a different one. So it's kind of good, it's pros and cons, but I think it's the best way to sort of build on the knowledge you've got as a student and just get a bit more confident as a newly qualified. I think I would also say is I was really worried about because my first rotation was community, and I was a bit worried that I was going to lose the acute skills because I hadn't done an acute placement for a while. But actually, from doing it, I realized that each of the rotations are going to have transferable skills that you can take with you to the next one. Like I say, once you're qualified, there's no kind of rush to tick all of your rotations off and move up. It's just a case of, like each one you're going to learn something different from. So I'd say don't panic if you don't get rotations that you want to start with, because you're going to get something from each of them. So
nice. So the next one is, how much support do you get? As I'm worried, sorry, I'm trying to get my head around this one. As I'm worried, I haven't had a lot of exposure with respiratory and orthopedic stuff due to the placements I've had and COVID.
That I would say really don't worry. You get so much support as a band 5. I missed my respiratory placement because of COVID, and then obviously I've just rotated onto critical care and surgery, which is all respiratory. And yeah, I just be open and honest with your supervisors. If it's an area that you're not very confident in, say respiratory, be open from the start and say, look, I haven't even done this as a student. And then they know what support to offer you. And I would say as well, everyone has this expectation that you qualify and suddenly you're going to be expected to know everything and treat patients on your own, and that's really not how it is. Like for me, on the rotation I'm on at the moment, I'm 6 weeks in now, and only the last 2 weeks have I properly started treating patients on my own. So I've had like a 4-week induction period, so you're really not kind of thrown in the deep end on your own. I think it's just be like good communication with your seniors to say, okay, look, I'm struggling with this, or I don't feel confident in this. And then, there's always time for them to add in extra support or extra training. And generally a lot of trusts will have kind of regular in-service training for band fives or different kind of competencies that you've got to meet. So I don't know, I'm kind of seeing the next sort of my first 12 months, even the first kind of 2 years, as almost like an extension of my kind of degree, you know, in that I'm still learning kind of at the moment, nearly every day is something new. So yeah, don't stress, you're not expected to be this fully rounded physio when you're kind of fresh out of uni. So there's plenty of support out there.
Lovely. The next one says, in your band 5 job, are you doing any on-call respiratory stuff?
Yeah, so I actually had my first on-call Monday this week. It varies from trust to trust. Some, as soon as you qualify, they'll get you on your on-call training and get you kind of sort of shadowing people and qualified to do that. Others will wait until you're on a specific respiratory placement. But yeah, obviously it is part of being a band 5, even if you're kind of thinking, oh, I'm not sure if respiratory is what I want to go into. But again, I was really worried that they were just gonna like leave you to it, but you get so much training with that, you know, because it's not the type of thing that they expect you to come out of uni knowing how to do. I think it's also quite an exciting part of being a newly qualified physio is getting to do on calls, because you don't get to do that as a student, and it's something completely different that you've not had to do before. So I really enjoyed it on Monday, but I've also I've still got a lot to learn. But then that's the nice thing about a band 5 is your expectations of what you should know are down here. And yeah, you've got loads to learn and loads to kind of develop. So, but again, every trust is different. So it's worth kind of speaking to people that work where you're either applying or going to start work to find out how they work in terms of like length of rotations, on calls, all of that.
Great. Do you find it difficult organising your time with CPD, work, social life, etc.? Any tips?
I find it easier to do now than I did when I was a student. Because I think as a student, you kind of, when you're on placement, you almost feel like you get home from work and you have to study, you have to do extra stuff. Whereas once you're qualified, it's almost like, right, my working day is, 8 till 4, 8 till 5, and I can come home and like that time is mine to then do your social things, your sport, your exercise. And I think that's really important so that you don't burn yourself out, don't feel that pressure when you first start to come home and then do extra reading on top. We're given kind of like study time within our rotation. So say for example at the moment we have sort of an hour and a half on a Wednesday afternoon where we have training, or it's for us to do kind of self-study or reflection, so it's almost built into your working day. It's taken a bit of getting used to, because obviously with placement you're there for what, 6 to 8 weeks, and then you get a period where you're back in uni, whereas obviously this is getting used to week after week after week. But yeah, I found that I've settled into it really well, and it's nice to get into a bit more of a routine and have more of a kind of permanent location. But yeah, I would just say when you first start, kind of keep yourself relatively free outside of work, because it is, you guys know how it is when you start a new placement, it's quite tiring, but you settle into it really quick. So
okay, so the next one is, when you graduated, what were the first things you did to prepare for applying for jobs, or in between when you already had your job secured and when you finished uni? So what did you do to prepare for your first job?
To be fair, I tried to have a little bit of a break in the summer, because I think when you're doing your DIS and your last placement, it's quite sort of an intense period, and then that when you start your first kind of rotation, that's going to be quite a lot, quite busy. So I think trying to give yourself a bit of a break is really important, and just have a bit of time to enjoy yourself. I tried to sort of, once I knew what my first rotation was, spend a bit of time sort of watching webinars, or kind of reading up on if there was any sort of the latest research, things like that. But yeah, really, I wouldn't I wouldn't worry too much about spending your whole summer getting prepared, because again, you're going to get that time once you start your rotation. So I hope that's all right. Just move in a different room.
Okay. You've done answering that question.
Yeah.
So cool. Do you find that you're studying during the week to learn new things for work and to consolidate knowledge?
Not hugely, no. Maybe, if I've got a patient that is something new that I've not done before, I might spend, say, 20 minutes, half an hour in an evening having a read up, or say kind of like before my first on-call that evening, I was sort of having a flick through our on-call passport. But again, I think it's important that you don't burn yourself out, that you give yourself that time after work and you sort of have that like work-life boundary. So you're like, these are my work hours, and then after work is my sort of free time. I think another tip that I'd probably say, and something I perhaps wish I'd known maybe when I first started, was like take your annual leave as well. So especially right at the start, like I would, within your first sort of 4 weeks, get yourself, say, like a long weekend booked in, or annual leave to kind of break up your kind of first couple of weeks, because they are intense, you are tired. So I think giving yourself that break is really important. And I think it's hard when you've never had to, you've had set holidays, etc. in uni, and you suddenly got to think, right, I've got 28 days to take, when am I going to take them? But yeah, definitely try and get some booked in as sort of within your first month to 6 weeks, because you'll definitely thank yourself for it. I didn't take any for the first 8 weeks and then was just absolutely knackered. So
sorry, just looking for the next one. Did university set you up well for working life as a physio? What have been the steep learning curves when in your first job?
Oh, that's quite a tricky one, actually. I would say yes, and sort of, I mean, it's always going to be different to being a student, but I always found it in a nice way. It was like, as a student, you feel like you've constantly got to impress someone when you're on placement, or you're sort of constantly feeling like I need to be learning, whereas actually when you get that band 5 and you suddenly get that little bit more responsibility, it's quite a nice reward for the hard work of the last sort of like 2 or 3 years. But yeah, I would say uni did set me up well. I think, they give you all the kind of theoretical knowledge, you have your sort of good variety of placements, but again, actually just repeatedly doing the kind of the job, that's how you're going to learn the most. So yeah, I think I don't really know there's any different way that uni could set you up, but obviously it's going to be different working as a qualified to a student. But I've almost found it like a nice change. Steepest learning curve, I would probably say, would be learning to trust your own clinical reasoning. Obviously, as a student, you've always got an educator that you're like, oh, I'm going to do this, is this okay? Or like someone always with you. Whereas obviously when you're qualified, you get that more independence, and actually you can decide if, what's the treatment plan for this patient? Should I or shouldn't I do something? And that takes quite a lot of learning to build your confidence up. So like for me in community, it probably took me a good 3-4 months to be able to sort of not even confidently, but be like, okay, I back myself with what treatments I'm giving. And then when you rotate into a new area, so now I'm in respiratory, I'm still very like, oh, I'm just going to bounce this off a senior colleague, because I'm still, kind of building up that knowledge. But yeah, remembering that you've got either more experienced band 5s, your seniors, 6s and 7s, and they're always there if you're kind of like, I'm not sure, I'm just going to ask them, and check it over with them. So, but I think be confident in yourself, because actually sometimes coming out of uni, you've got a completely fresh perspective on people that might have been working for 10-12 years and just been doing things the same. So don't be afraid to suggest something different. Just because you're new doesn't mean that it's not right. So
I actually have a question sort of leading on from what you were just talking about. Did you ever feel like you had sort of imposter syndrome when you started working then?
Oh, 100%. Like, I feel like anyone who says that they haven't at least had that a little bit when they start as a new band 5, I feel like everyone has it. It's completely normal, because again, you've gone from being a student where you're not really kind of expected to have all this responsibility, and then suddenly you're a band 5, probably in a new team, perhaps in an area you've not worked in before, and you just sort of feel like, God, I'm being trusted here to look after patients, and I don't feel like I've got the skill set. But actually you probably know more than you're giving yourself credit for. And I think just remembering that all of your team, they've all been there before. So, you'd like to think that they're going to think back to when they were newly qualified and what the support was and how they needed their team to be, and hopefully give you the kind of the same support as they either had or wanted to have. I would say if you are kind of really struggling with that imposter syndrome, it's worth chatting with your supervisors and letting them know that, you kind of feel like that, and what the support is that you need to build your confidence, really. And because they're not mind readers, they can't tell how you're feeling if you don't communicate with them, which is hard at the start because you've got to build that relationship with them. But I think that's why it's really important to sort of, if you've got any concerns, voice them with your seniors, build that relationship up with them, and then it makes it a lot easier as your rotation goes on, to sort of get what you need from it for your learning. So, but yeah, it's completely normal. So, and generally I found that with both my first 2 rotations, that within sort of the first month, it tends to settle a little bit, and you settle into the team, you get to know the routine, and you're like, right, okay, I feel more like I'm supposed to be here now, and I kind of have a vague idea of what I'm doing. So
okay, I think we'll take just a few more, just because we might be getting Alex in a few minutes. So the next one is, do you have any tips for organising a CPD folder, or sort of what did you include in your application?
Yeah, again, this was something that I felt we didn't really do at uni. We had sort of, talks on why CPD is important and what you can do for it, but we didn't really do anything that was, all right, here's how when you're qualified you maintain it. But I think it's very personal choice. Everyone's going to be quite different. Some people might find that they like having a physical paper copy, and they like having certificates from things, printed out reflections, articles with what they've kind of highlighted and read about. Some people like to use the online stuff that the CSP has, so that it's all kind of in an online folder for them. Easiest way I find is I keep mine on my Google Drive, and I just have sort of all the kind of a table where I put sort of the date, what was the CPD activity I did, how many hours was it, and then sort of what were the main kind of points that I took from it. And I try and sit down and add to that sort of once every month. So even if it's something like just a reflection that you've done, or you've just had a training session in work that was like 20 minutes, I add all of that on, because I think I'm not going to remember that in, say, 2 years time if I'm called up by the HCPC. So that's how I log what I've done. And then obviously within that folder I save things like reflections, if there's articles that I've read, if we've had handouts from training, I just save that all in that one online folder, so that I've got it to go back to, but also if the HCPC call you up, you've got all the information there that you can pull together into what they want. It can be quite helpful, if you haven't, to go on the HCPC website, because they have on there a lot of examples of for different professions in for what they want if you are called up. So if you have an idea of what they would expect from you, I find that helped me, and like, right, okay, if I am, here's what I'm going to have to send to them. So I kind of make sure that I'm sort of modeling mine off that, and that way, if I am, it's all there. It wouldn't take long to organize. So if you haven't already, definitely have a look at that, and probably just ask around with people that are perhaps band 5s that are perhaps a couple of years ahead, and if you want, ask to have a look at their CPD folders, because again, everyone's going to do it differently. You might try one way, it doesn't work for you, so I think just a bit of trial and error, but I would try and maybe set yourself a reminder every month or so to just review it and think, oh, okay, I haven't done a reflection for a little while, so I'm going to reflect on perhaps if there's something that's happened, like your first on call, or oh, okay, I haven't looked at an article in a while, so I'm going to do that, rather than leaving it all for a year and then going, oh, you know, I've got loads to do and it feels like a bigger task. So
thanks, Chloe. Thanks to Steph as well for putting some useful links in the chat. So there's information from the HCPC on CPD and audits and things. So you can just look in the chat and have a look at those links. And then also the CSP portfolio. Yeah, and hi Alex, it's really nice to have you here. You're just in time. I think we're just going to stop with the questions for now. We'll come back to some more at the end. But Alex is just going to be speaking to us about career progression and career routes and that sort of thing. So yeah, over to you, Alex.
Hi, yeah, thanks for letting me speak. My name's Alex. I'm a professional advisor at the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, and I work closely with Steph in our workforce and development team. And yeah, I've been asked to speak to you tonight about career paths, but in particular, sort of what different career paths you might take other than the clinical setting. So I just, first of all, just wanted to introduce myself. This is me graduating at King's in London, and then this is me sort of much later down the line working at the CSP and presenting at a conference. And so, yeah, just a short background. I graduated from King's in London and then went and did my junior rotations at Medway Maritime Hospital. I then got my first band 6 job in London at the Whittington Hospital. And after a couple of years there, continued with band 6 rotations at Guy's and St Thomas's, which was a hospital I'd really wanted to work at. And then after a couple of years, I needed a bit of a change, a bit of a break from the full-on clinical work, lots of variable hours. So I decided to locum, and it was a really nice opportunity to have some short stints in lots of different trusts, doing different things, but also having that freedom to be a bit more flexible and to travel, which I really enjoyed. But I always knew I was going to come back to, probably I'm not the most exciting person, so come back to a bit more of a sort of permanent job, but it was really nice to just have that freedom. So I then came back to Guy's and St Thomas's and got a static job, band 6 job in the community, which quickly became a team lead job as a band 7. And I was there for quite a little while, and then I started to get sort of itchy feet. I wanted something a bit different, maybe away from the clinical setting, and I just by luck saw a secondment opportunity at King's University to work in their physiotherapy team, with their particularly around placements. So I got that secondment, which was really great, and worked there for 6 months. And it was just a really, I think it was the first time that I'd seen what you can do with a physiotherapy degree that's away from the clinical setting, and what doors are open to you, and the opportunities, and just how many skills that you use in the clinical setting that can be brought to a different type of setting. So I really enjoyed that, and it was because of that slightly different environment and that challenge that I went for a job at the CSP and became a professional advisor, which is where I am now. And oh yeah, I'm also I still do bank work at Guy's and St Thomas's, so still keep my hand in a bit clinically, and it was quite it was good. I was able to go back and help as part of the sort of COVID crisis, whenever that might end. So what I wanted to talk to you about was what's really helped me with sort of the type of things to think about when you're newly starting off in your career, and how to structure it. Now, I sort of came in late, I apologise, but Chloe, I heard, was talking about CPD, so she might have covered some of this already. And the advice I would give is to look at the 4 pillars. Now, confusingly, you might have heard the 4 pillars being bashed around a bit. The CSP has the 4 sort of CSP pillars of practice. That's different. And often the 4 pillars are associated around advanced and consultant practice. But actually, this is something that you should be thinking about now, and making sure that you are demonstrating all of those pillars at every point in your career. And they'll change a lot depending on what level you're at, what job you're in, what type of setting you've got, what team, and that's fine. But it's just I found it a really useful way to keep my options open, keep my CPD really varied, and open up more opportunities for me. And I was going to say something else. So I was just going to go into, so these links below are, the first one is Scotland. These are applicable throughout the whole of the UK, but Scotland in particular has a really useful career framework that talks about these 4 pillars at all different levels. So even support workers, students, Band 5s, all the way up to consultant level, they talk about these different pillars and how you can hit them. So I'd recommend having a look at that. But also we've done some case studies on advanced practice and consultant physios, which is on our website, which is at the case studies and the link there. And we've asked lots of physios throughout the whole of the UK in different settings what they do to reach those 4 pillars. So it's just it doesn't matter that they're from an they're at that advanced practice level. It's just really good to give you ideas and think about it. And I also think you're at a really nice stage of your career where, when I was graduating and just studying, if someone had asked me what I wanted to be what was my career aspiration, I guess I would have just said a really good physio, which is a good aspiration to have. But I think if you'd asked a medic, a student medic, they would have said, oh, I want to be a consultant, because they have a clear career path. And I think now you're, with how the direction is going, you can get to consultant level as a physiotherapist at an advanced practice level, which is brilliant. And so you can now start aspiring to reach that level eventually. And like I said, by doing all these pillars, by hitting these pillars and demonstrating them, it's a really good start. And I think at your stage in your career, you're already hitting all of them at university, because your course is so varied. And I would really encourage you, if you're going into a clinical post, is to not just suddenly focus on just clinical things, is to keep that, keep the other pillars open. And I just wanted to give you a few examples. Like I said, there's lots of examples already in these links, but just some ideas. So, for example, leadership might be leading within a team, or even being part of a team and demonstrating various leadership within that. Leading or demonstrating leadership with patients. You might demonstrate leadership with support workers or other Band 5s as you progress up your career, showing leadership with clinicians at a lower band than you. Even in your peer groups, you could show leadership. I remember I became a manual handling rep, so I was teaching manual handling to clinicians at a much higher level than me, but I had been trained to do more manual handling. And And I would encourage you to take opportunities like CSP reps, stewards, workplace reps, and I'll touch more about mentoring later, but it's never, you could mentor you should get a mentor, but you could also mentor yourself. And that's all leadership. Research might be something like leading and participating in a journal club, maintaining your evidence-based practice and keeping up to date with what's topical depending on what setting you're in. I would always recommend that you keep up to date with the setting that you're in, just to keep it relevant. And when you're doing reflections, it's much easier. But there's also the Council for Allied Healthcare Research, which is I've got a link for on the next page, which is a really great organisation to get involved with. And there's also the National Institute for Health Research, which again has lots of interesting advice on their website, just for you to see how you can keep involved in research. Clinical is often the sort of obvious one that you can be reaching. If you're working in a clinical setting, it's probably your assessment, your treatment, your diagnosis of patients, like I said, using your evidence-based practice, but also things like health promotion as well. And finally, education. That could be something like doing in-service trainings, teaching your patients, teaching students, teaching other members of the MDT, and even lots of universities quite like it if you go back and offer teaching to students at any level of your career. And I think that was the main thing I was going to say about that. So, and I was also, I think I've probably put this already, just a few top tips to, like I said, keep that varied portfolio. I've already said, oh no, I didn't say this. So join your CSP local regional network. All of you, you're probably dotted all around the country, and there is a regional network for every single region. I would really encourage you to get involved. Their sort of board or people who are on the council for that will be from a complete mixture of clinical backgrounds and levels. And it's such a great way to network and just get involved with lots of different things. We can sort of point you in the right direction, but if you go on the CSP website, you can find out where your regional network is. And I'd really, really encourage you to get involved. But there's also the someone might have mentioned this already, lots of CSP interest groups that you can be involved with, or just keeping up with the ICSP interest groups. But it's a brilliant way to network, as I said, from all different specialities. I'm not very good at this myself, but I would encourage hugely that you get onto Twitter. I know Instagram is starting to increase more for clinical work. Even if you don't want to particularly post something on Twitter, I'd recommend that you get an account and just see what really prominent clinicians are out there, what they're saying, the research they're doing, and maybe as you sort of develop your confidence a bit with Twitter, like I am at the moment, you might start responding to people. But it's a really great way to make contacts, to network, and to see what's happening sort of as soon as it happens. As I mentioned before, ICSP, but also just make sure that you keep up to date with your frontline and CSP news. It's just a perfect way to keep up to date with what's going on, and it's delivered to your door if you're a member, or into your email inbox. And like I said, it's just really a really easy way to keep up to date. This might have been mentioned already, and I mentioned it before about getting a mentor. So it's never too early or too late to get a mentor. I've only just got one and wish that I'd had one before. This could be someone, and I'd actually recommend that, depending if you're working, that they're not necessarily in your workplace. I would recommend someone that they could even be from a different profession, but just someone that you look up to, can talk about your ideas, your aspirations, or even get inspiration from them. It can range in formality. We've got a mentor, a recently brilliant updated mentor scheme, but I'd really, really recommend it. And And that's sort of different from your supervisor. And finally, I know this was already mentioned by Chloe, but just keep reflecting on what you're doing. Think about what your next options are and what you've learnt. And I've just put some quotes in from clinicians that have sort of given advice around developing your career. And I think I've pretty much covered most of them. I talked about the mentor, so someone who you find easy to talk to. Definitely find opportunities to shadow others. I couldn't recommend that more. Again, different clinicians, different settings, different professions. Everyone is pretty happy about you shadowing them and asking questions. Reflection, I've already said. And I really like the one that says, just be open to every opportunity, especially if some of you might be going into rotational work. There will be times when you might be frustrated that you don't get the area that you want, or if you didn't get a job that you wanted and you feel that you're taking a step back. There's always learning, and I would never, lots of clinicians at higher levels say, don't rush your career, which is an easy thing to say probably when you're high up in your career, but just take every opportunity. There's always learning, and try to remind yourself of that if you sometimes feel that for whatever reason you've taken a back or a side step. And finally, I'm really sorry, I'm really against busy slides, and I've just put a ton of stuff on a slide, but this is more for you to take away and have a look at your own time. But this is just to show how much advice that we've already got in about your career path, things to think about. And I've just put stars next to the articles that I think are particularly useful. So the first, I don't know if I put, hold on, I need to move my, so the first two links, the advancing your practice, and you don't have to be a hands physiotherapist. You might have seen these already. These are really recent articles in Frontline, all about what I've just been saying, the different options open to you, and just good examples of what different clinicians have been doing. So the advancing your practice talks about lots of different examples that you can meet those 4 pillars. And you don't have to be a hands-on physio is some really nice case examples. And then in the career development, the moving into education and the breaking into research, they're actually quite old articles, but really relevant, and definitely talk about this sort of, if you might not be, if you're not following a clinical path, or you don't want to completely follow a clinical path, really great ways to get into different parts of physiotherapy and healthcare. And just finally at the bottom, if I had lots of time, I would go in and show this to you, but I don't. So the NHS England and Health Education England, this is applicable though across the UK, have created a page called the Universe of Opportunities. And you click on it and it sort of brings up this sort of, if you've been on it already, you'll see, brings up an image of space, and you click on various options. There's options for pre-registration and then post-registration. And it's for allied health professionals, but basically it just gives you loads of ideas about the type of opportunities and things that you can be doing in your career. So I'd really recommend that you have a look at that. And also, as I've put there, they've done lots of e-learning for health programs that you can be doing that you might find interesting. So I think that was all I was going to say about just different ideas for your career. I see there's lots of messages which I haven't been looking at, but I'm happy to take any questions. I'll just stop sharing.
Thank you, Alex. If anyone's got any questions specifically for Alex, now would be a great time to put them in the chat, in the Q&A box, sorry. And equally, if you've got any other just general questions, feel free to put those in as well. I think, thank you, Chloe, for answering some of those while Alex was speaking. So I'll just have a look if there's any more in the chat.
Yeah, I tried to get through a few of them, but there's lots on there. So sorry if I haven't managed to reply, but I think hopefully, even if I've not replied to yours directly, there should hopefully be something in the other answers that might give you sort of a better idea.
There's quite a nice one here. Is it worth getting a mentor as soon as you start out as a band 5, or should I wait to see how I settle in to the trust first, as it has a buddy system in place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's completely up to you. It probably doesn't really matter. And if you know there's a buddy system in place, it might be worth seeing, because that might be a really great opportunity. It'd just be worth seeing sort of what level that buddy is. If it's a sort of another band 5, and if they're working in the same team as you, that would be a great opportunity to have some support, but maybe not quite that mentor support. So, like I said, depending what opportunities are given, maybe just wait and see what there is. But yeah, ideally someone who is probably, if they're in your trust, sort of separate from your team, someone that you look up to, can ask sort of questions that you might not ask other people, and like I said, someone just that really inspires you, and that might be then you need to take a little bit of time to meet some clinicians that really inspire you before you ask them. But yeah, I would really start thinking about it now.
Don't know if there's any more that you wanted to answer in the Q&A box.
Yeah, I saw about the rotational post. Yeah, that's a difficult one to answer, and I think, there's no good answer for it. I think very traditionally, you would go into we were encouraged to go into a rotational post, but things have changed hugely now, and there's so many more opportunities to go into different posts that I wouldn't just limit yourself. I would look at what's out there, what works for you, apply for lots of different things, and see where that takes you. I mean, the benefits of rotation is that it gives you possibly more of an opportunity to see different areas, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily, you could be in a static post and you could then say quite early on, however, I'm still keen to see different settings in different areas. What can you offer me? So yeah, there's no easy answer. I would just look what's out there and look what works for you, and just apply for lots of different things.
Okay. There's another one here that says, I'm worried that I'm going to lose my skills as I graduate in a couple of weeks and do not have a job lined up yet. Any tips?
I would probably say don't be, like I graduated in like the June, and I didn't start working until the end of September. So, I had sort of a good 3 months off where I, hardly probably picked up a textbook and just had that complete break. You spent 2 or 3 years studying, you're not suddenly going to forget those skills overnight. I think if you're particularly worried about keeping your hand in with things, you can always be worth having a look at sort of your tech jobs that you can sort of do in between, so graduating and finding a full-time job. But also you've got the whole summer still to apply and find jobs, and I think don't worry about, oh my god, I need to start straight away, or that's it, I'm going to completely forget. And I think if you are a little bit worried, right, okay, well, I'm going to set myself one sort of hour or 2 slot every week where I'm going to just read over something and just kind of keep things ticking over in your mind. But enjoy the break a little bit, is what I would say. And you're not going to forget things overnight. I was worried of going back onto a ward because I hadn't been in a ward environment for kind of 18 months until I started on surgery, but actually within sort of the first couple of days it all starts to come back to you really quick when you're doing it. So hopefully that reassures you a little bit, and I think just don't give up, keep looking for jobs. They will happen eventually. Like I say, just use any of those rejections to kind of learn from for the next one. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more, Chloe. You'll always feel, especially well, maybe especially now, but maybe throughout your career, you can't be up to date with every area of physiotherapy all the time. So as Chloe said, you might be working in an MSK setting, you might be that for quite a while and have not been in the ward environment. And when you go into a new setting, your supervisor and your team know that. And you just need to be open with them and tell them, what your recent experience is, what you are slightly nervous about, what you feel you need more support with, what you're more confident with. And they want that. They would much prefer that you were open and tell them that than just worry that you might not be up to date with your skills. And I think, loads of students or new graduates decide to travel for a couple of years after they've graduated. Obviously, that's a bit more challenging now, but it's absolutely fine to have a gap. And as Chloe says, enjoy the break. You've worked really hard. You won't forget it. And if you do, you'll quickly remember it.
I know Chloe already answered a question about interviews, but I just wondered whether, Alex, you had anything quickly just to add. Do you have any key and important tips for interviews?
Well, I don't know what Chloe said, so I don't want to repeat that. I think, God, I have got loads of tips, but we haven't got all evening. So I think my one tip would be, you've probably all been encouraged to write a SWOT analysis, or I think they've got different names now, but your sort of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I would recommend that you have one of those prepared. But in particular, don't just list a load of weaknesses, or don't. I would instead sort of pick a strength of yours. So for I'm going to be really bad on the spot now, but pick a strength. For example, I'm really hardworking. This is going to be a really bad example. So I'm really hardworking and keep up to date with my evidence-based practice or something. And then use that and use that same strength, and then and therefore as a weakness, that might mean that I am quite a high achiever and put a bit of pressure on myself. And then an opportunity might be that this means that I remain up to date and confident in my work, and a threat might be that sometimes it can be too much stress and I can't keep up with everything. That's a really bad example, but my point is to keep, instead of just writing lists of things, try and sort of have a pattern about strength or a weakness and how it can be good and bad. As interviewers much prefer that you've thought that through rather than listed a load of things. So that's probably my top tip for interviews.
I'm happy for people to drop me a message on Twitter if they've got other questions. So I'm at Chloe Dooley 99, and that's not a problem. And I tend to tweet a little bit about my sort of band 5 journey. So if you fancy having a follow and just sort of seeing what kind of day-to-day as a band 5 is like, or if you want to drop me a question there that you think of after, that's not a problem.
If you also had any more questions, or you just wanted to learn from someone that's a bit more experienced than you, I would really encourage you to kind of get in contact and start building a bit more of a network with people on Twitter and on Instagram, because there's quite a few experienced physios on there that would love to kind of start a discussion with you. And again, we've spoken about the mentorship scheme, and there's links to those sorts of things in their chat. Also, you can send a direct message to at the CSP students on Instagram and Twitter. I think that's their handle. But also I'd encourage you to have a look at the ICSPs. So there's one for students and for newly qualified. So yeah, just I think have a look at what's out there and just get a network. And I think that would be another tip that I'd give. I think there might be some more questions. This is a good one. How do you build resilience and look after your mental health in your everyday work life?
Yeah, because I think I really struggled my first sort of like 6 months qualified. Found just I think with obviously, the COVID lockdown as well, that added pressure on top of, starting work in the middle of a pandemic. But make sure that you've got kind of a good group of like friends and a good support network, perhaps, that are outside of work. So, not healthcare, not physios, that you can have that sort of complete split from work with. But then I think also having people at work who you can debrief and reflect with, because, the nature of working in healthcare, that you're going to see things that perhaps, on sort of, not everyone is having to have exposure to. It can be sometimes quite sad. And also I think people that you can reflect on things with as well. Because like, I know for me, I'm quite hard on myself. So actually having a senior mentor who can go, no, actually you handled that really well. These are all the positives, helps put that spin on it and give you that bit of a confidence boost. But I think having that work-life balance as well is really important. So, so that you don't burn out and get yourself really kind of stressed and anxious, have your working hours, and then outside of work, have that time to chill and just have a break from it.
Trusts are doing a lot at the moment for their staff's mental health. So I would really recommend that you keep up, once you get your job, there'll be lots of emails going around about well-being and what's available. So see what's out there. I would also, depending on what setting that you're in, I would really recommend early that you speak to your supervisor regularly. Often that's arranged quite regularly anyway, because for new starters. But tell your supervisor, hopefully you'll get on with them, how you are. If not, whether there's a peer group, and just keep talking. But yeah, also as Chloe said, just make that work-life balance. We're all good at saying it and probably not so good at doing it. Make sure that you leave work on time. No one thanks you for working extra hours. Only you just get exhausted. On your days off, make sure that you switch off. And whatever works for you as downtime, do that. So Karen Middleton, the head of the CSP, she said to us early on that, especially with the COVID crisis and what she was suddenly managing, she had to make sure that every single morning she had a run outside. And she said that she would not start work, whatever, until she had her run and had her exercise, because she knew that she would not be as supportive and perform as well at work if she hadn't given herself that time. So that's, some people might find a run far more stressful, but find something that works for you at the right time of the day, and really, really make sure that you do that, because you are going to be working in stressful and unpredictable settings. And I think as soon as you get into that practice, the better, and don't have this huge pressure on yourself as a new clinician that you should know everything and be able to perform at 100% all the time, because no one can. And just finally, on the CSP website, our employment relations team, actually, I'm not sure it's on the website yet, but they're doing a lot of work around well-being. So keep an eye for what the CSP's got.
Thank you both. I'll send this one your way, Alex, if that's okay. What is your advice for answering interview questions relating to policies / guidelines? And what policies and guidelines should we be aware of?
That's a hard question, because there's a billion policies and guidelines. I can't give you a list, because there's never a list. It'd be wonderful as there was, because otherwise we'd all be reading the same thing for an interview. It does massively depend on what setting and area you're going into. So I would look at, if it's a trust, I would look at what sort of their local area is like, and what policies and guidelines they might be looking at. If you're going to a rotational post, it's challenging, because you can't look at every orthopedic, respiratory, up-to-date guideline. It's a bit overwhelming, but nice guidelines are a really good place to start. And your sort of basic hip, knee guidelines like that osteoarthritis, sort of fairly up-to-date ones that you can just, they're pages long, these guidelines. So don't overwhelm yourself, but just make sure that you're sort of just aware of what's out there. And like I said, different trusts will have their own local policies. So you can't know about every single one. And in an interview, you might just say, I'm not aware of that guideline, but you know, if I came across it, if I needed to come across it, I would read it. And you know, saying, you know, I'd ask my supervisor and other clinicians that I work with what I should be reading. So it's a bit of a challenging one to answer, because there are lots, but it really does depend on what setting you're in. But nice guidance is probably the safest place to go. But also, again, I know I work for the CSP, so I'm going to promote it, but read your Frontline magazine and keep up with CSP news, because we will tell you what new and exciting stuff and policies and guidelines are coming out in all different settings. You know, have a look back at your last few months of Frontline and what's been advertised as an idea.
Great. I think we've just got one more question. Any guidance on how to improve your notes in a clinical setting, as this is an area of concern for me? I am a newly qualified Band 5 and just looking for advice. Thanks.
I'd probably say read others, you know, see what other people are doing. That's what I found helpful, is that actually reading how other people document things, etc., is quite helpful. And just practicing it. The more that you do it, the quicker you get at it, and you know, getting all of the right sort of information in it. I think there's also some good sort of guidance on the CSP and HCPC website on, you know, here's from a legal point of view what you've got to have in them, which is probably helpful as well to have a look at.
Yeah, I've not got much to add. Depending on where you're working, your own trust or workplace might have their own policies on particular note structure, so you can just check whether they've got that. And again, getting support from your supervisor or your peers is another way. But practice and you'll get there. And if someone is criticizing your notes or suggesting that you make changes, get them to really explain why and give you more support. So and don't worry too much about it. And definitely don't worry about how long it takes you to write your notes. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes and sometimes it takes hours.
Thank you both so much for answering all these questions and being here tonight. And thank you all for coming. This is the first sort of webinar that we've done like this, so it would be great to get some feedback from you just to know how you think it went and whether we could improve anything. So Steph's just going to launch a poll in a second to see, just to get some feedback from all of you. It is anonymous, so don't worry about giving honest feedback. And also, if your question wasn't answered, feel free to get in contact with us through social media just to ask any more questions you might have. But yeah, I'll give you some time to answer the poll and then we'll wrap up, I think. But yeah, thank you all for coming, and hopefully if we do an event like this again soon, I look forward to seeing you. But yeah, thank you all. Bye.